April 2003. The war in Iraq is at its fiercest. A wall of dust rolls over Baghdad, turning daylight into a dim orange twilight. Buildings vanish behind the storm, and the streets echo with the hollow sound of distant artillery. The wind howls through broken windows, carrying the smell of fuel, smoke, and sand. Near the banks of the Tigris River, a U.S. armored unit lies pinned down. Tanks and infantry crouch behind debris, ammunition nearly spent, vision reduced to nothing. Across the river, the 1st Hammurabi Republican Guard waits with T-72s hidden in the haze, ready to strike once the storm clears. Every passing second tightens the trap. Far above, 2 A-10 Thunderbolt Warthogs slice through the storm. Their wings tremble in the turbulence, engines fighting the air thick with sand. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Donk Strasburger leads, Captain Greg Billy Bob. Thornton holds close on his wing. They can't see the ground, but they can hear the war, the static, the gunfire, and the occasional crack of something large hitting steel. Then a voice breaks through the noise. Lieutenant John Coke Blocker, down there with the ground troops, calls through bursts of static. "We're under heavy fire at Muthanna Bridge. We need help now." Both pilots exchange a silent moment of understanding. They've flown through storms before, but not like this. There's no visibility, no radar lock, and no guarantee they'll find a way back up. Donk pushes his throttle forward, his hand steady despite the shaking cockpit. "We're coming," he mutters. The 2 A-10s roll inverted, disappearing into the orange void below. Engines roar, sand churns, and Baghdad vanishes beneath them. In that moment, 2 pilots descend not for glory, but for the men whose lives hang by a thread on the ground below. At Muthanna Bridge, the storm has swallowed everything. The wind carries sand like smoke, stinging the faces of exhausted soldiers crouched behind broken walls. Tanks and Humvees sit half buried in dust, their engines running low on fuel, their crews running lower on hope. Across the river, the 1st Hammurabi Republican Guard presses forward. T-72 tanks flash through the haze, their barrels glowing red-hot from constant firing. Mortars fall without warning, shattering concrete and throwing waves of debris across the American line. The defenders of Task Force 2-69 return fire when they can, but their ammunition is nearly gone. In the middle of it all, Lieutenant John Coke Blocker clutches his radio, voice raw from shouting through static. "They're crossing the bridge. If they reach us, it's over." Each transmission cuts through the storm for only seconds before the wind drowns it again. Around him, men yell for ammo, for cover, for help that may never come. Coke keeps his eyes on the sky, hoping for a sound. The one sound that might change everything. Miles above, that sound already exists. 2 A-10 Thunderbolts cut through the upper edge of the storm, their wings shimmering in the dim light. Inside the lead jet, Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Donk Strasburger listens to Coke's voice fade in and out over the radio. Static, gunfire, a brief moment of silence, then the same plea repeated again. There's no hesitation, only decision. He glances to his right. Captain Greg, Billy Bob Thornton, flies tight on his wing, barely visible through the orange fog. A single nod is exchanged, no words needed. Both pilots roll their aircraft over. Gravity pulls them toward the storm. The horizon flips, and the world turns brown and weightless. Engines scream as the Warthogs dive straight into the invisible battlefield below. For a few seconds, there is nothing but the roar of turbines and the endless sand. Then the storm closes around them, and the rescue begins. The storm swallows the Warthogs whole. Visibility drops to meters. The horizon vanishes in orange fog. Grains of sand strike the canopies like shards of glass, scraping the surface with a sound that cuts through the roar of the engines. The world outside no longer has shape, only color, motion, and chaos. Inside the cockpits, vibration replaces sight. Every gauge trembles. The control sticks shudder under the constant gusts. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Donk Strasburger stares into a wall of dust, trusting his instruments more than his eyes. Altitude, speed, attitude. Those numbers are the only truths left in the sky. Through the headset, a burst of static carries Captain Greg, Billy Bob Thornton's voice. "Can't see the river." "Stay on me," Donk replies. Their formation is tight, the distance between them measured in instinct. They fly not through sky, but through a storm dense enough to hide mountains. Every second, Donk adjusts his trim, fighting invisible currents that toss the aircraft like toys. Suddenly, a streak of light cuts through the haze, then another. Anti-aircraft tracers climb from the ground, random and blind, red arcs searching for targets they can't see. The lines flash past, disappearing into the storm above. The Iraqis are firing at ghosts. Donk banks left, keeping low. The engines strain under the maneuver, the cockpit rattling with each turn. Billy Bob mirrors him perfectly, using the faint glow of Donk's taillights as his only guide. Below them, Baghdad flickers in fragments. Rooftops, half-destroyed towers, a flash of the river, then darkness again. The storm swallows it all back in seconds. Both pilots focus on their breathing, the steady rhythm that keeps fear from creeping in. The storm screams around them, but their voices stay level. They've trained for this moment their entire lives, to fly when no one else can. Somewhere below, buried under wind and sand, men are still fighting. And through the storm, the Warthogs are closing in. Through the endless haze, faint flashes of light break the monotony of the storm. For the first time since diving into the sand, Donk can see the fight. Tiny bursts along the riverbank mark the chaos below. Gunfire, explosions, tracer lines, barely visible through the dust. He banks left, aligning his nose toward the river. The instruments flicker, the horizon invisible. He arms his smoke rockets, ready to mark the target for Coke's position. The first squeeze of the trigger sends nothing. No smoke, no flare. Just silence. The pod's jammed. The system's dead. Donk exhales through his mask. There's no time to fix it. He switches over to countermeasures and improvises. Flares erupt from the underbelly of his jet, streaking downward like falling stars. They scatter across the eastern riverbank, glowing bright against the brown storm. On the ground, Coke spots them through the haze. "Visual confirmed. You're right on target." That's all Donk needs. He pulls into a wide arc, circling through the storm to line up again. Billy Bob follows, holding formation just above the rooftops, wings slicing through sand and smoke. As Donk rolls out of the turn, the battlefield takes shape. He can see faint silhouettes, vehicles moving near the bridge, muzzle flashes blinking through the fog. He steadies the crosshair on a shape he knows too well. A BMP infantry carrier crawling toward the fight. He presses the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger unleashes its voice. A mechanical roar that drowns the storm itself. A torrent of 30mm shells rips through the air, tearing into the target. A heartbeat later, the BMP detonates, a fireball punching upward through the sand. From below, the soldiers of Task Force 2-69 freeze. For a second, the gunfire stops. Every man looks toward the sky. The deep, guttural sound of the Warthog's cannon rolls across the battlefield like thunder. For the first time in hours, hope has a sound. The response is immediate. From the northern bank of the river, the 1st Hammurabi Republican Guard comes alive. Gunners scramble into position, their 23mm cannons roaring to life. Red tracers slice upward through the haze, fiery lines of light chasing the ghosts above. Donk banks hard right, the aircraft groaning under the strain. A stream of rounds flashes past his wingtip, vanishing into the sand behind him. The sky becomes a storm of its own. Arcs of fire crossing paths. Invisible walls of metal waiting to be hit. Billy Bob pulls away from formation, dropping lower to draw the fire. His Warthog hugs the river, barely a few hundred feet above the water. The tracers follow him like angry comets, bursting around his canopy as he races forward. He lines up his sights on the source, a T-72 maned battle tank, its turret swinging slowly toward the bridge. He squeezes the trigger. The GAU-8 answers with its thunderous growl, shaking the cockpit. The shells slam into the tank's hull, armor splintering under the relentless impact. A second later, the turret erupts, flames spiraling upward, smoke twisting through the dust-filled sky. He climbs sharply, engines straining, the burning wreck shrinking beneath him. Up above, Donk rolls back into position, scanning the ground. 3 more tanks sit along the riverbank, their cannon flashes glowing faintly through the haze. He dives, fires a short burst, and pulls up again. One tank stops moving, another reverses, disappearing behind debris. But the anti-aircraft fire doesn't stop. Every rooftop and open field seems to spark with muzzle flashes. The air fills with chaos, tracers cutting through the orange fog like lightning. Still, the Warthogs press on. Each pass is faster, lower, more precise. Their rhythm becomes mechanical, almost surgical. Fly in, fire, climb, roll, return. Below them, the tanks that once held the river in flames now burn themselves. Smoke rises in columns, merging with the sandstorm above. The battlefield shifts. The defenders on the bridge lift their heads, realizing the tide is changing. For a few moments, the battlefield is nothing but fire and dust. The storm has thickened again, swallowing smoke, sound, and light into one swirling blur. Donk and Billy Bob circle low, searching for any movement on the riverbank. The tanks are burning, but the enemy isn't done yet. Out of the chaos, a single flash erupts from a rooftop. Brighter, sharper, faster than anything else in the storm. A missile launches, slicing a white trail through the haze. Billy Bob catches it in his peripheral vision. He jerks the stick right, pulling the Warthog into a hard roll. The missile follows for a heartbeat, then streaks past his left wingtip, missing by feet. It detonates somewhere behind him with a thunderous crack that shakes the air. The shockwave rattles the cockpit. Warning lights blink red across his panel, gauges flickering. He can hear his own breathing inside the mask, short, heavy, real. For a moment, he doesn't speak. The world feels still, his pulse louder than the engines. Then the discipline returns. Slow breath in, steady exhale. He checks his instruments, his hands firm on the controls. Everything holds. He's still in the fight. He climbs slightly, clearing altitude, eyes sweeping the rooftops for the launch site. Nothing visible, just heat shimmer and sand. But that doesn't matter. He's already turning back toward the target zone. Above the noise, Donk's voice cuts in. "You clear?" "Yeah, missed me by inches." The Warthogs fall back into formation, their gray silhouettes carving lines through the storm. They descend again toward the river, defiant as ever. Below, Coke and the soldiers of Task Force 2-69 press against the sandbags as the sky flares with light. Flares bloom overhead, scattering through the brown haze, bursts of color that pierce the suffocating storm. Each one burns for only seconds, but it's enough. To the men on the ground, those lights mean one thing. The A-10s are still there, still alive, still fighting for them. The battle rages on, but inside Donk's cockpit, something changes. His targeting computer flickers, once, twice, then goes dark. The glowing reticle fades from the glass in front of him, leaving only empty sky. He taps the display, but it stays black. The system is dead. No rangefinder, no targeting assist. Nothing but his instincts and the feel of the aircraft beneath him. He checks his gauges. Fuel levels hover dangerously close to bingo, the minimum required to return home. Every pass he makes brings that number closer to 0. For a moment, he considers breaking off. It would be the smart call, the safe call. But below, the fight still burns. If he leaves now, the ground troops will have no cover until the next flight arrives. And that might be too late. He exhales once, quiet and steady, then makes the choice. He's staying. Donk banks left through the haze, lining up again with the Tigris. The sand lashes against the canopy as he flips through weapon systems, switching to a single AGM-65 Maverick missile. The targeting screen flickers with static, the picture broken and gray. Shapes blur into one another, buildings melting into smoke. Then in the corner of the image, movement, a faint silhouette, a heat signature crawling along the riverbank. A BMP infantry carrier, repositioning under the storm's cover. Donk steadies his hand on the control stick. He doesn't wait for a lock tone. He fires. The missile drops from the wing with a hiss, then disappears into the storm. Seconds stretch longer than they should. Then a flash. A burst of orange light cuts through the fog, followed by a rolling echo that shakes the air. The BMP erupts into flame, its wreckage glowing against the curtain of dust. Donk watches from above, fuel alarms flashing in his periphery. Target destroyed. The Warthog banks west, smoke curling below its wings. He knows he's running on borrowed time, but his gamble has kept others alive. The storm that once hid the enemy now hides their retreat. Across the Tigris, the Republican Guard begins to falter. Columns of smoke twist upward, merging with the sand-filled sky. Burning tanks light the riverbanks like fallen stars, their flames bending in the wind. From above, Baghdad looks frozen in time. The city below has lost all color. Nothing but dust, metal, and the faint red of fire glowing through the haze. Even the river seems still, carrying drifting ash like memories of what the battle once was. Donk and Billy Bob circle low, their warthogs carving slow, deliberate arcs through the storm. Each pass is quieter than the one before. The tracers that filled the sky minutes ago have vanished. The guns that once roared now stay silent. Only smoke moves, curling from wreckage along the bridge. Down below, the U.S. lines start to move again. Tanks rumble forward across broken ground, infantry advancing behind them with rifles raised. What had been a desperate defense is turning into a push. For the first time in hours, the Americans are no longer pinned. They're advancing. Coke lifts his head from behind the sandbags. The air is still thick with dust, but he can see the faint outlines of the Warthogs circling above. Every time the engines sweep overhead, the sound brings something new. Not fear, not tension, but strength. The wind begins to ease. The sand thins enough for shapes to form again. Destroyed armor, scattered weapons, and silence where chaos once reigned. The enemy is breaking. The bridge holds. And for the first time, the storm that nearly buried them has become their ally. Above the battlefield, Donk steadies his aircraft and looks down one last time at the river. Through the lingering smoke, he can still see the fires glowing against the current. The fight isn't finished, but the tide has turned, and in the middle of that storm, 2 Warthogs have given an army its second chance to breathe. The battlefield has fallen quiet, almost. Along the riverbank, one last anti-aircraft gun keeps firing into the storm, its tracers clawing upward in blind defiance. Each burst cuts through the haze, bright red streaks searching for enemies that have already won. Donk spots it first. The muzzle flashes pulse in rhythm, the crew working frantically to reload between bursts. Even now, even beaten, the defenders refuse to stop. "AAA, north side of the bridge," Donk calls over the radio. "I see it," Billy Bob replies. The two A-10s bank left, their wings almost touching as they line up with the Tigris. Engines roar in unison, their formation slicing low through the haze. The river guides them forward, silver under a layer of drifting smoke. The gun fires again. Tracers rise head-on, crossing the air between them like burning ropes. Each round passes so close that the light flashes against their canopies, leaving momentary streaks in their vision. Still, they press on, steady, unwavering, flying straight into the storm's heart one final time. Donk dives first. He squeezes the trigger, and the GOU-8 Avenger answers with a shuddering growl that drowns out the world. A storm of shells rips across the gun's position, tearing through sandbags and steel. Billy Bob follows half a second later, adding his own burst, the sound merging into one long, thunderous echo that rolls down the river. When they pull up, the firing has stopped. The gun is gone. What's left is a rising plume of black smoke, curling lazily into the fading sky. The river reflects the firelight, turning each ripple into streaks of gold and red. Above it, the storm begins to thin, sunlight breaking through like a slow awakening. The two Warthogs climb together, wings level, their engines steady against the calm. Below them, Baghdad drifts back into silence. The storm that once blinded them now lies still beneath their wings, conquered, quiet, and done. The battlefield drifts into silence. Smoke curls along the river, the storm losing its strength as the last echoes of cannon fire fade into the wind. For the first time, there's no return fire, no tracers in the air. Only the low hum of the Warthogs circling above. Inside Donk's cockpit, the fuel gauge drops into the red. The numbers are clear. Bingo fuel. One more pass, and they won't make it home. He keys the radio. "Bingo fuel, we're heading back." From below, Coke's voice cuts through the static, exhausted but steady, carrying relief instead of urgency. "Bridge is secure. Enemies pulling back. You've done it." For a moment, neither pilot says anything. After everything, silence feels unfamiliar. Billy Bob exhales, shoulders sinking against the seat. Donk glances over his wingtip, both aircraft still intact, battered but alive. They turn west, engines rise in pitch as the Warthogs climb through the thinning sand. The storm breaks apart around them, sunlight spilling through in fractured beams. Their gray fuselages are streaked with soot, paint stripped by sand and smoke. Scars of the battle they've just left behind. Below, the Tigris shimmers faintly in the returning light. Columns of black smoke drift upward like fading memories, marking where tanks once stood. The bridge remains, battered but unbroken, stretching across a river that has seen too much. 40 minutes of combat, minimal losses, a victory carved out of chaos. As the two A-10s pierce through the last layer of cloud, the desert sun catches their wings, turning them silver against the blue. They head west, engines fading into the distance, leaving behind only drifting smoke. And the quiet echo of thunder that saved an army. The storm is gone, leaving only light and silence. Down on the tarmac, two gray A-10s taxi to a halt, engines winding down with a metallic sigh. Their wings are pitted with sand and streaked with soot. the smell of burned powder clings to every panel. Mechanics gather quietly, staring at machines that look as though they've flown through another world. When the crews climb out, they are met not with cheers, but with nods, small, wordless gestures of respect. They had stayed longer than fuel allowed, flown lower than reason advised, and turned a hopeless fight into survival. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Donk Strasburger and Captain Greg Billy Bob Thornton received the Silver Star for their actions that day. Lieutenant John Coke Blocker, the man who called them through the storm, earns the Bronze Star and a quiet reputation for valor. The official reports speak of precision, discipline, and exceptional airmanship. But the soldiers who were there remember something simpler: the sound of engines coming closer when all else was lost. The war moves on, new battles rise, new names fill the rosters. But the story of the Warthogs over Baghdad lingers, passed between pilots, whispered in hangars, replayed in the memories of those who watched hope descend from the clouds. They called it close air support. To the men on the ground that day, it was something else entirely. Hope descending from the storm.